There's something special about riding a motorcycle that's nearly half a century old. In this episode of Pegasus Motorcycle Tours and Consulting, I bring you a review of the classic, iconic GL1000, the first motorcycle in the iconic Goldwing line, titled King of Kings by Honda. In this video, I'd like to introduce you to this motorcycle, give you a little bit about the history, and tell you a little bit about my experience, how it rides, what to look out for, and why you should experience this motorcycle once in your lifetime at least. Stay tuned. Zdravo I dobrodošli, bom dia, bem-vindos, servus, willkommen, buenos dias, bienvenidos, greetings riders, and welcome to another Pegasus Motorcycle Tours review of a classic, iconic motorcycle, something that put Honda on the map for the long term. I mean, I'm still riding a Goldwing. This year is a 1976 Honda Goldwing GL1000, the first motorcycle. Well, it was released in 1975, a year before, but this is the very first generation of Goldwing motorcycles. If you've been on this channel for a while, you know how I feel about the Goldwings. I did a review of my 2003 Generation 5, titling it the King of the Road, and I stand by it. I've owned 4 up until this point. I use a Generation 5 in my other business, the Pegasus Sidecar Tours, guided, narrated private tours of Southern California and San Diego County. If you're ever in town, get in touch, PegasusSidecarTour.com, and I'll be your guide for the day. We can fit 2 in the sidecar, 1 behind me. Everybody gets a Bluetooth helmet, HD audio, and you get to hear about this amazing history of the place and see Southern California coast in the most unique possible way. Speaking of history, we are in front of the oldest, largest mission, well, one of the oldest, largest missions in California, located in Oceanside, California, and it's absolutely stunning to be here. You feel like you're in Madrid, you know? So there's a ton of history in this place. And history is what you get when you throw your leg over the Honda Goldwing. Glorious history at that, because this motorcycle is a product of putting a bunch of engineers together, giving them free rein, tabula rasa, blank slate, do whatever you think is necessary, push the boundaries, and see what can be done. That was the motto, after which the Goldwing was created. So in the later end of 1972, an engineering team led by Shaichiro Hirimajiri, who later became, actually, interestingly enough, the CEO of Genesis Sega game console, which I'm sure some of you remember from your childhood, earlier day. I sure do, because they had the best graphics on the V-Rally racing game. So he created this M1 prototype. That was the name of the motorcycle that was being created by his team. And it was really intended to push the boundaries. There was a bunch of firsts that were introduced on that motorcycle. A flat 6-cylinder engine, a dual disc brake system in the front. They had spoked wheels at the time. There's an electric start with an optional kickstart that's stored in this dummy tank. This is actually not a gas tank. Another Honda first put the gas underneath the seat to keep the weight low. It's a 5-gallon tank for that long distance touring, shaft drive, liquid cooled, etc., etc., etc. They wanted to add other leading technologies of the day, such as EFI, ABS, but the goal was to create a motorcycle that was extremely powerful. In fact, it was 2 cc's shy of being twice as powerful as the Honda flagship, the CB750. So they hired this engineer who was popular, who was kind of an icon in his industry, from working on 5- and 6-cylinder MotoGP engines and even V12 automotive engines, and they give him free rein and money to create this incredible motorcycle. And this is ultimately what gave birth to the GL in 1975. So a lot of those technologies were direct translated into the GL. If you look at a picture of the M1 prototype, you realize that a lot of that stuff was actually put into the GL. That's my cue. It's time to introduce you to the actual engine of the motorcycle. 4-cylinder, liquid cooled, super smooth, power range all over the place, peaking at 5,500 RPM. In later iterations of the first generation, which is in this year, this is titled K1. K0 is titled for 1975 model, the first model released in the US. K1, K2, K3, K4, 1979. At the time, it sold for $2,900. It doesn't do all that well in the first year. They only sold about 5,000. But throughout the first generation of this motorcycle, which dates from 75 to 79, they sold close to 100,000 of these, 90 plus, 92, I believe. So incredibly popular motorcycle, produced specifically for the American market, for the wide open road, the wild, wild west, to rival Harley Davidson Electra Glide, Moto Guzzi Eldorado, and another BMW that was basically feeding the American market for long distance, comfortable tours with plenty of luggage space and comfort for that two-up long distance riding that American continent is still known for. For that reason, interestingly enough, not a lot were sold in Japan. So now you can sell this motorcycle to Japan because Japanese buyers are very eager to get their hands on this and bring it back to the motherland. In fact, my blue 1979 Honda Goldwing, which I purchased at the time of the birth of my first child, foolishly thinking I would have time to restore it, sold to a Japanese buyer for an awesome sum, which I'm still impressed by because they still pay for shipping and the repairs over there, etc., etc. So you get your hands on one of these and you have a classic that you can actually use. You can put in, not storage hopefully because they deserve to be on the road, but you can put it in a museum or personal private collection, whatever. But it's a bike that's only gonna raise in value. The motorcycle weighs in at about 586 pounds dry. The goal was always to keep it right around the 600 mark. Over the next years in the first generation, it would slowly gain some weight and the power range would drop so that you had more torque at the bottom. The engine, super smooth, very reliable. It's got the flat 4 single overhead cam engine, 31 millimeter carbs. You can actually replace that nowadays with a single one. There's aftermarket manufacturers that allow for that. And it's got that shaft drive, which is situated above the transmission to actually shorten up the motorcycle, make it a little more comfortable. That was one of the main problems with the M1 prototype. It was just way too long. This one has 40,000 miles. So it's 45 years old and 40,000 miles, and these motorcycles still run like nobody's business and put a smile on your face. You feel like you're on a boat. I mean, it just pulls straight like a locomotive. There's nothing stopping this motorcycle. And then you get into twisties and you realize, oh, it's a Honda after all. I could take this. I love riding this thing. When I picked it up that night, I was so excited I didn't even realize that I was out of gas. And sure enough, in the middle of the highway, middle of the night, I run out of gas and just kind of coast to the next exit. And luckily, there was a gas station there because this motorcycle is a bitch to push. I suppose that had to happen. Well, we know that the fuel gauge works, which is not common for these bikes, but there's a first for everything. There's only one way to learn these things, so I love it. I love it. Oh my God, it's like being back in time. Everything from 50 to 60, you feel the inner workings of the engine coming through the handlebars. But then you get past 70, which is laborious. It takes some effort and it takes flat, if not descending ground. But you get over 70 and it's just smooth. If it wasn't for the wind in your feet and the noise, you would feel like you're flying in a throne. It's just an amazing motorcycle. Incredible motorcycle. It's extremely heavy, especially with these aftermarket touring pack and fairing. What happened was Honda did have plans to sell this motorcycle with touring packages available from Honda line. They worked with Windjammer to create that whole package, but molds were destroyed accidentally, so Calafia came in and produced their own version, and I like this version a little more. This is the Eliminator 2 kit, and it's gorgeous. I really find it gorgeous, even when it's not color matched. The Calafia Eliminator 2-piece plug straight in. It's literally plug and play. There's a little plastic plug that just feeds directly into the plug that's existing on the motorcycle, and all the blinkers and the lights, and in this case even the radio works like it should. So I love that fact about it. It's quite heavy, I couldn't give you an exact weight, to be honest, but it's heavy enough to be cumbersome to carry around. So I also appreciate how Calafia repositioned the original helmet locks to their side cases here. You can fit 2 helmets on the inside, and this part is also removable, the backrest, and there's a beautiful chrome luggage pack on top as well. I love that. I think it's just so classic. Even on my Indian Scout, just adding that chrome luggage carrier in the back gave it such a classic look, and I love the fact that that little detail exists. So it's such a complete and beautiful motorcycle. I did have the Calafia 2 Eliminator on my 1979 Goldwing, which was Lindsay blue, a gorgeous, gorgeous color. However, it wasn't really quite color matched perfectly, and you could see. This motorcycle obviously has been stored indoors for most of its life. The paint still shines. I'm amazed that you can have a motorcycle that's nearly half a century old. So literally half a decade short of half a century old. I also read in one of my manuals that the Windjammer or the Calafia require a pretty hefty weight strapped or connected to the front forks, to the top end of the front forks, to keep them stable. I have not noticed that on this motorcycle, and it pulls fine. It tracks perfectly straight at 75 miles an hour. That's more or less where you're going to want to be. Anything more than that is going to get a little bit exciting, maybe more exciting than expected. This first generation differs slightly in the second iteration, second, third, fourth iteration, so the K3, 4, and 5. Actually, K4 is where it ends. K4 is the name given to the 1979 iteration, all first generation Goldwings, and the minor changes were that the wheels were 5-spoke Comstar wheels that were bolted, no maintenance at all, and the exhaust was all chromed out. Looks kind of nicer at that time, in my opinion. Some changes to the lighting that were added to the actual assembly here as opposed to the subframe before. And minor changes like that. The power band was brought down a little bit, and the weight was increased by a few pounds, just over 600. So those were some of the main changes. There was also a really, really attractive 3-piece instrument panel cluster added here that included the coolant temperature, the gas gauge, and I think a battery meter. And sometimes this piece can also be made of full leather, and I found that very, very attractive. My 79 Goldwing had that and look, and I really, really, really liked it. The first year look has the green speedometer intact, and usually they're sold. You'll notice if they've been sitting outside that the tack is cracked. On this motorcycle, it's as pristine as one can find nowadays, still in running condition. The brakes on this motorcycle do the job to stop it. Obviously, you're dealing with older technology and a heavier bike. The frame is super strong, super rigid for that 2-up riding. Again, the faux gas tank hides some electronics on the left side. This panel can also remove where you can store your Kickstarter, which was removed, and I believe in K3 models of the first generation. And there's also the reservoir for the coolant is located there. On the left side, where this panel is of the motorcycle, is where the battery is. The weight is very, very low. The seat height is manageable. This is not the original seat. The original seat has the same shape, but it's black and it's quite heavy, quite big. I love this seat. I think it looks great, especially with this passenger backrest. I think it also matches the color of the motorcycle. There is one special edition model that was produced for the bicentennial anniversary of our own history, and it had golden wheels and a few golden details. It was dark brown, this beautiful dark brown with golden lines across of it, and that was a special limited edition. Only 2,000 were made, so if you find that, keep that. That's going to be worth some money. This motorcycle sold for $2,900 in 1979, and you cannot find them cheaper than that now. So it's kind of interesting. The price slowly went up as the items were added to the motorcycle and as it became more finely tuned. So incredible motorcycle with incredible history, very easy to work on. Parts are very easy to find. In fact, I had a hard time starting this motorcycle just yesterday, and I noticed there was an ignition switch problem. So I basically went online, ordered an ignition switch, and it was here within 12 hours. I mean, how amazing is that for a motorcycle that's 45 years old? The ignition switch was alarmingly easy to replace. 4 screws that hold down the light switch, 2 bolts that hold down the speedometer, and 2 other bolts that hold down the ignition switch. It took about half an hour. Alarmingly easy to replace. The switch cost about 25 bucks. So that's the beauty of these engines. 100,000, close to 100,000 of these were sold in that first generation between 79 and 75. In fact, 75 sold only 5,000 models, so it almost was a flop, a failure of Honda, but eventually they started to do some improvements on the motorcycle, and by the end, when the word spread, this bike took over. And now, of course, Honda Goldwing is the most sold motorcycle in the world. I think there has been around 640,000 of these motorcycles sold, close to 530,000 miles on recorded on a stock engine, and supposedly they can go over 1 million. If you watched my review of the Honda Goldwing, you know what I feel about these motorcycles. I feel like they're king of the road. This was termed as the king of the king, the king of kings. So the Titan. I don't know why they didn't say Titan. Why say king of kings? But maybe they didn't know their Greek mythology as well as we do here at Pegasus Motorcycle Tours. So when they created this motorcycle, they had the aim to create something magnificent and powerful that would last over generations. And sure enough, Honda Goldwing now continues to push the boundaries, being the first motorcycle to be shaft-driven, being the first liquid-cooled single overhead cam flat 4-cylinder with 2 brakes in the front, and in later models, in 2006, of course, being the first motorcycle to offer a airbag system. Among many other technologies, Honda Goldwing continues to push the boundaries, including a reverse gear, etc., etc., etc. One other innovative design is that even the sight glass for your oil level has a little windshield wiper, basically, that you activate with a screwdriver from the outside. I thought that was quite impressive. Incredible motorcycle. If you find it, get your hands on one that's running. If you like working on bikes, it's not a particularly difficult motorcycle to work on. The exhaust was all chromed out in later models of the first generation, and this shine actually comes back quite easily with the little Dremel tool. I did not even use any kind of substance to clean it. It was just the Dremel tool with the little cloth round screw-on type adapter. There are numerous maintenance manuals. I own 3 different ones from different eras, including one from that age. Of course, the Climber manual, the Haynes manual. They're very informative, and they make working on these bikes much easier. Everything is fairly accessible. Their timing belts are out there. You have the head here. The 4 31mm carbs, they pull out from the left side all at once, so they're fairly easy to take out of the motorcycle. So there's not really much to it. The shaft drive prevents any kind of need for overly burdensome maintenance, and that's the beauty of these bikes. They clearly last a long time. I mean, 45 years old, and still rides like it should. There still actually is a radio on this motorcycle. It's solid state, all transistor, and it gives you the option of music and voice, which is kind of interesting. The antenna is tethered to the actual windscreen, also very interesting. I did notice that the front brakes were leaking, so I replaced the master cylinder because replacing it was cheaper than rebuilding it, to be honest, at about $16 a piece. Both are cheap, but if you like tinkering and you feel comfortable working on these bikes, the parts are very available and inexpensive. And I noticed when I'm replacing it that there is no electrical switch that connects to the master cylinder in this first year model. In later models, there was a switch and a cable connecting to it. That switch, when activating the lever, tells the brake lights to go on. However, even though you have a brake light indicator in the front panel, that indicator still goes on. So I don't know what the system does. Is it pressure activated somehow? But it does tell you that the brakes are going on, even though the front lever has no electrical component or no switches going to it, which is very, very interesting. I find that quite fascinating. So if you get your hands on one, you know, expect it is an older bike. There's things that you need to watch out for. For example, peek into the gas tank, make sure it's not completely rusted, because that's quite difficult to get out and to fix or to repair, to get back to working condition. That also tends to gunk up the carbs. In the first models, you only have the temperature gauge or the fuel gauge. Oftentimes that fails, that doesn't work, so keep an eye out when looking out for these. And when you pop it open, there is a little plastic tray that holds your tool kit, which is quite inclusive. It seems like you could do anything on this bike with that provided toolkit. It's wonderful to have it as well. It comes in this beautiful, obviously faux vinyl ugly pouch, but it's cool to have it. The little booklet itself has the number of the year on it. It's yellow in my case for the 2000 version limited edition of 1976. The book has a little golden mark, and the key is also leather wrapped, so that's another little difference. Also, the front fender is a little bit splayed out on that version as well. Well worth the investment if you find one. They're very, very rare. And obviously take a look at the VIN number. If the VIN number is in the single digits or the low triple digits, that tells you the production number of the motorcycle. And with any classic motorcycle, the lower the number, the higher the value. Be wary of naked Goldwings. They tend to attract different type of buyer and connoisseur who likes to cut it up and chop it up and remove all the weight, because the bike, of course, behaves very happy at that point when you shed all the pounds off. What happens often, though, is that they have to cut the bracket that holds the blinkers. If you find yourself with the motorcycle that has no blinkers and you would like to get it back in its original shape, it's highly likely that you're going to have to do some welding. There it is. A little bit of history and a review of the 1975 to 79 Honda Goldwing GL1000, the predecessor to one of the most iconic motorcycles on the road still today. 45 years later, still rides like it should. Tells you something about the motorcycle, and it tells you something about the rider who can keep a bike like that on the road. Not to toot my own horn, but it feels so damn good to ride a motorcycle like that. Anyways, stay safe. Thank you for being here. Please let me know what I've missed and what you'd like to share with the reading public. The best thing about this channel is that we get to learn from each other, and I get to learn from you. That's the main reason why I do this. It's purely a passion project for me. We're unsponsored. If you like what we do here, you can support us by purchasing our gear from the website or even donating through Patreon. The link is in the description of this video below. Thank you again for watching. Please participate in the conversation and ride safe until the next time. Nick, I'm out.